Okay, let's get started. This is the Vision Committee meeting for the 15th of November, 2017. Correct me if I'm wrong. Hearing none, let's go. So we have Dina with us. Do you want to, we'll go ahead and start about the Arkansas River Corridor Plan. Shall we start on that?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that and start.
Okay. So Mayor, members of council, good afternoon. So this is a second update for the Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan process today. And so this is basically an update and walking through the full draft master plan. So as an overview, again, to remind some folks, the extents of the study area are from Tunnel Drive to Mackenzie Avenue on the west and then to the east, and that length is approximately 5.5 miles. There were 9 specific goals that were identified back when money was allocated to fund the study and the planning process, and those 9 goals are identified here. The second one is incorporating previously adopted plans, and there are several of them listed here, which includes the US 50 Corridor Plan, the Eastern Fremont County Trails Open Space and River Corridor Master Plan, the strategic plan, the downtown plan, and some of the detailed implementation next step plans as part of the Eastern Fremont County Trails and Open Space Corridor Master Plan. So, and we walked through those goals during the previous update. So just to remind everybody, there's actually 4 primary zones in the study area. So starting on the west, that zone in purple here is called the Western Gateway. The second zone is in yellow is the downtown core, and that's primarily from 1st until 9th. The third zone is Griffin Park, and that pretty much goes from 9th over to Reynolds. And then the eastern corridor zone is the furthest eastern portion of the study area, which is basically Reynolds to Mackenzie. So just a brief overview again of the process. There were 4 committee meetings from May through August of this year. There were 3 public open houses from May through August, plus the boards were up during the Whitewater Festival in June. There were more than 100 attendees at the various open houses. Alternatives were available as of June 22nd, and on the city's website. A draft preferred direction was available as of August 10th. The draft master plan, the full document that you received in your packets, was available on October 17th. And then more recently, the Council Vision Committee, the first time we talked about this was on September 20th. And at that time, we actually did a special mailing to all property owners within 300 feet of the Arkansas River, both in the city and the county, for that particular committee meeting. And then most recently, Planning Commission met on October 25th, and Planning Commission at their meeting unanimously recommended the amendment of the city's comprehensive plan to add the Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan. And with that, I will pass out hot off the press meeting minutes from the Planning Commission meeting that weren't complete in time for your packet, so I'll hand those out.
That was Ashley's fault. Sorry about that.
So as those are coming around, I will continue. Just a reminder again to everybody that the information has been on the city's website. These are screen captures of the city's website, and the right-hand pane here shows you the Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan page, where we've posted basically the most recent information, the full draft master plan, as well as the previous drafts and alternatives are all still on the city's website. So then moving into the master plan itself. There are each of the 4 sections that I previously described have their own chapter within the master plan document. And within each of those sections, so the 4 sections, each of the sections includes an ownership map. So this one is just pulled out from the downtown core district, but wanted to make sure that we identified that. One of the specific comments that we had heard from council at the last committee meeting was to make sure that property ownership was somehow identified in the plan. And so each of those sections, each chapter, has an ownership map that clearly identifies what is private ownership, which is the extent of the land, versus any public or quasi-public or other ownership. Each section or chapter also includes an existing zoning map, so that information is available to read within each chapter. Each section also includes a floodway and floodplain map, so you get a sense of where both of those lines are within each of the sections of the plan. And then with that, I'll start and walk through each of the sections and talk through some of the highlights of the illustrative vision plan or the illustrative drawing that you see in the master plan in each chapter. So first, the Western Gateway. Again, this is the area basically from sort of Tunnel Drive, or where US 50 wraps around and comes into the community, over to First Street. And this is primarily the current Black Hills site. And there haven't been a lot of changes in this particular area from the last time we spoke. The area is primarily envisioned to be used as open space, perhaps overflow parking for some of the downtown and riverfront activities. The idea of a possible pump track has also been identified. One of the specific feedback components that we receive throughout the process is that folks really want pump tracks to be closer to downtown versus further out. We're showing sort of a flex green area that could be used as just informal picnicking or a small soccer field. And then I think one of the two of the important components are the furthest western portion is this idea of potentially some urban camping sites, and urban RV sites that would be more short term. And the idea is to have some spots that are located close into the community where folks can actually walk to some of the activities on Main Street and in downtown, and perhaps some of the future activities along the riverfront. And then the second component of that is the boat ramp, knowing that the current boat ramp at the Pink House upstream just a bit might not be available longer term, and so we identified a location for a boat ramp on the Black Hills site. So that's primarily the components of the Western Gateway. I think the other key element is reinforcing some of the ideas in previous master plans or adopted plans of having First Street really be a Western Gateway intersection into the community and into downtown. So then moving into the downtown district. Again, the downtown district goes from First Street basically on the west to 9th on the east. And this is actually split into two separate graphics because there's more detail and more information in this particular section of the plan. So the downtown core, again, not a lot of changes or updates from the last time we met here. The idea is that primarily on the north side of the riverfront between 1st and 4th, there may be mixed-use development in the future that may include a hotel, may include additional restaurants and retail uses, potentially could even include some housing. Just depends on what existing owners and or potential future owners would like to do with that land. It's important to note that the Centennial Park graphic that's shown here, that master plan was specifically created and finished earlier in advance of the larger master plan process. So this is simply inserting that previously approved master plan for Centennial Park. Then moving east of 4th on the north side, near the existing historic train station, we're showing the concept of potentially a boutique hotel in that area with some additional parking. And then with that, I'll move to the second section of the downtown core. And this graphic is basically on the western edge showing the 4th Street Viaduct and then reaching over to 9th. So that's the extents that you see on this particular graphic. Again, not a lot changed here from the previous committee meeting with council. The idea basically within the downtown core, one of the big ideas is to have the Arkansas River Trail in the future be on both sides of the river. So both on the north side and the south side between 1st and 9th. which is the most urban and urbanized section of the trail. So it provides more options for folks to navigate in and around the Riverwalk in that area. So the concepts that are illustrated here, currently this is zoned industrial land and identified as undeveloped land in the current comprehensive plan. And so we're identifying this in the future being a combination of open space activities, open space including some additional parking and access for folks to get in and close to the riverfront, potential for community gardens, and potentially having some additional flood attenuation facilities in that area, as well as extending the Riverwalk on the south side that doesn't exist in that location. The second component that is a vision or possibility is having some additional residential use on the south portion of that property. Those residential uses would bring in basically additional residents within walking distance of the Riverwalk in downtown, so that hopefully in the future there would be additional activity and bodies, quite frankly, to be walking distance of some of the great things that we have in downtown and that are envisioned along the riverfront in the future. And then I would say the final component of the downtown core area straddles 9th, and that vision on the west side of 9th is to include a mixed-use redevelopment scenario that again may include a hotel as well as some additional commercial and retail uses along the riverfront. The river curves there a bit, and there's some great opportunities for views upstream, and there's also sort of a significant banking in this area where there might also be an opportunity for both a lower river walk that may be inundated at times, as well as a higher level river walk that would stay out of flood levels. And then again, on the east side, just to 10th Street, we're identifying another location for perhaps in the future an additional cluster of higher intensity housing, again, to get more options for housing in the community that we know are needed, and also having more folks, again, living close and near both the riverfront as well as downtown. So sticking with the downtown core area, this is really the only section of the study area that we're proposing land use changes. And that's a component of, again, an area plan that potentially is adopted as a component or amendment to a city's comprehensive plan, is looking at land uses. So the recommended land uses are basically creating a new land use district on the north side of the river from 1st to 4th Streets, and that would be residential mixed use. And that's indicated sort of in the magenta on the screen. The other proposal here is to change some of the land use, not the zoning, the land use on the south side of the river. This is currently, as you can see here, it's currently indicated as green in the city's comprehensive plan, and green is identified as undeveloped in the current city's comp plan. And the definition of undeveloped in the city's current comp plan in part basically states this is an area for future development. And we've heard that a lot of folks really don't want to see active development in much of this area. And it's also important to note that much of this area is also in the floodplain. So what we're proposing is actually to change the land use in this area to the public space and park space land use category that already exists within the city. So basically the purple land use category here, it's a new mapping of it, but the land use category already exists within the city. Versus the RMU, the riverfront mixed use land use, is a new land use that we're proposing as part of this project. And then lastly, the second new land use category that we're proposing is riverfront residential. And that's indicated in sort of the ochre colors, and that responds to the vision illustrative plan that I just walked through. So basically, in the entirety of this master plan, we're proposing 2 new land use categories. One is a riverfront residential, and one is riverfront mixed use. And then in some instances, like this on the south side of the river, we're simply recommending to change a land use category from, in this case, undeveloped, which means future development, to parks and open space. So then moving on to the third section of the master plan, and that's the Griffin Park area. Here, most of the recommendations are related to improving some of the trails in the area and trail connections to the park. We have identified 3 potential locations for trail connections from Lincoln Park to the south, or from the south, I should say, as well as having on the western portion of the park better improvements in terms of the parking lot and a sense of arrival to Griffin Park, with potentially some more visitor information, maps of the trails, potentially even having some sort of structure where you could even rent bikes and other things to use in the park and on the trail system within the park. On the furthest east portion, we also were looking at many trail connections to the north, or from the north, and from northern neighborhoods and even neighborhoods to the north side of US 50. And one of the other comments that we had heard from the last committee meeting was to remove some of the in-between connections that we had previously shown to the riverfront from the north. So those have been removed, and the only remaining improved connection that we have from the north is basically along Reynolds Avenue. And then I guess lastly, this district is again simply just showing the potential for some additional improvements to trails within Griffin Park itself. So then moving to the eastern corridor. Yes? Sure.
Can I ask a question? There. Are those bump trails?
It's simply the illustrative, and one of the updates that was made is talking about that potentially being botanic gardens or other uses, or simply becoming trail system within Griffin Park. I think the biggest recommendation there is just to clean that up, and actually that's the last area where there is a land use recommendation change from basically industrial, again, to that existing parks and open space category. So we're proposing a land use change there as well.
Is the final phase going to include that trail system in there, or whatever you call that?
It's simple. It's simply a graphic. So that graphic could be inferred to be trails for a botanic garden. It's an illustrative graphic.
Go ahead, Scott.
I know it looks like trails. Just
Okay,
just
I'm
pretend.
sorry.
Just
I
just
was
pretend
confused.
though. I mean, it could be, but it could also just be a nice row of.
Could be roots.
It could be roots. Yeah, it could
Alright.
be bamboo shoots. Whatever you want it to be.
Thanks. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, so moving on to the eastern corridor, which is the fourth section of the study area. Here again, the eastern corridor, most of the improvements are focused on some minor trail connections and trail improvements, including supporting previously identified recommendations on trail improvements. And so one of those previously identified recommendations is trying to figure out some sort of connection from the eastern portion of Griffin Park and connecting over to Florence. And we know that further effort is underway currently. We also are illustrating a more improved access from the existing Arkansas Riverwalk Trail, which is basically on the easement of the sewer line, to have new trailhead and enhanced trailhead amenities at the current parking lot, as well as having a better pedestrian or trail access down to the recent lease agreement that the city has and takeout on the eastern side of Mackenzie Avenue. And then the final improvements here are simply recommending actually doing some improvements to that new takeout area, including identifying a parking lot and better circulation for local residents versus, say, crafting, buses that may come in and out.
Could I ask, I'm sorry. This is that where that oil well, that old oil well is right there?
It's right there.
You can see it on the map.
You see
See where
the-
our arrow's at? It's,
I'm on the, it just, who,
just south.
how does that go? Does that go with that property that the people now own, or
No.
that?
I believe that's still on private property, but I'm not sure. I
Oh,
don't believe that's part of the land the city's leased.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was, never mind. I retract the last question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dan,
Hey, Dina, can I ask a question too, just to take a step back, but, in the Griffin Park area,
Mm-hmm.
what's the boundaries of where it's showing these trail connections from the south off of these streets that is the base of the bluffs, is that part of Griffin Park, or is that owned by the homeowners on top of the hill?
Yes and yes. So if you look at the detailed property delineation from Fremont County, you'll see that some ownership actually goes over the bluff and down the bluff a bit, just the way that the parcels are carved out. And in other cases, the park does start generally at the top of the bluff.
Ridgewood was platted down there at the bottom. Once in a while, you would sell a house up on Frankie Lane in Ridgewood, and they would claim to be in the flood zone. So some of the properties go down and touch that flood zone there.
Mhm.
And we were saying that it would flood if we'll have to build an arc, because that's up the cliff. But yeah, some of the properties actually go down to that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to address this whole issue, hold on. There. Address this whole issue of
We were getting rid of one of these.
incorporating private property into this master plan and blah, blah.
While you're on
Okay.
that map, weren't we getting rid of one of those access things from the road? No?
Not from the south, no. I think that was one of the items perhaps brought up, and I went back and confirmed through the previous notes that that was not recommended. It was the access points from the north.
But I'm referring to a comment from Mr. Hoare at the last meeting. Yeah, but I thought he had a concern with one on the south too, no?
I don't recall that. Okay, so back on the Eastern Corridor section. So another key component of the entire plan and each of the sections is looking more specifically at riparian conservation strategies. So I've pulled out this page from just the Eastern Corridor section, but there are riparian conservation strategies identified in each of the chapters of the plan. And so those look at things such as being cognizant of the floodplain, cognizant of stream banks and how stream bank improvements might occur into the future, looking at better buffers along and back from the river's edge, and additional in-river recreational opportunities. And a lot of those recommendations are, again, tied into some of the currently planned in-river improvements that are more upstream in the Western Gateway and downtown section of the study area. And this is another graphic that simply illustrates, as part of those riparian focused areas of the plan, identifying where there are wetland areas, where there are ponds and lakes and other riparian zones along the corridor. So we have a clear sense of where those exist. So then another component of the master plan, which was a small component, but the team also looked at signage and wayfinding and focusing primarily recommendations, again, within the downtown core, and we will take that forward when the detailed signage design project kicks off early next year. So this information in terms of their recommendations of where to identify gateway signs or directional signs, we'll pull that forward into that more detailed design study that's coming up. And then the last component of the master plan, but perhaps the most important, is implementation. So the final chapter in the plan document is the implementation chapter. And it's important, again, to recognize that this is a 20-year plan, perhaps even 20 years plus, in terms of time frame for implementation. The implementation chapter is organized by zone, by those 4 zones or sections that I've previously walked through. And then within each of those sections or zones, the implementation recommendations are organized by topic. So by land use and character, by the conceptual vision plan, recreational improvements, and then river and riparian improvements. And then tied to that, we've also tied a timeline and a cost. And so the timeline, there's 4 components to the timeline. The timeline is immediate, which is basically what can we do in the next 12 months. And then looking at near term, midterm, and long term. And then we also identified generally, this is planning level, order of magnitude costing to some of these projects simply by identifying a dollar sign. So obviously a $1 sign is lower hanging fruit from a cost standpoint, and $4 signs is we need a lot of money. And so finally, I pulled out the priorities, basically the short-term or immediate time frame, next 12-month priorities that were identified from an implementation standpoint within the plan. And I'll walk through those by each of the sections. So for the Western Gateway, basically in the first 12 months, what we identified is the signage implementation. So let's get that signage done and in place in terms of both the gateway signage and some of the wayfinding directional improvements. Within the downtown core, the immediate next 12-month time frame included continuing on the Centennial Park Phase 1 implementation improvements, making sure that those are finished within 2018. And then what's not really on here, and hopefully will start maybe late 2018, will be some of the in-river improvements as well. So cleaning up some of the riverbank and providing some more of the in-river improvements that are currently being designed. Thirdly, within Griffin Park, those immediate time frame implementation items again are the signage implementation, and that would obviously be coordination with the Rec and Park District, and then at least having further discussions and starting initial design on the sanitation site itself in terms of what could that be in the future. And then lastly, with the Eastern Corridor, within the next 12 months, the immediate time frame project is really to both design and hopefully implement some of the public boat access improvements. So those are really, there's not a lot from a planning standpoint you can do in 12 months. We have to think out and budget for a lot of these projects, and many of these are partnership projects and grant applications. But this is basically what can we bite off, what's sort of the low-hanging fruit from both a time frame standpoint and cost standpoint. So that's what these are that are identified on this slide. And with that, I am done.
Dina, just a couple questions. On the signage implementation at Griffin Park with the Rec and Park District, does that include the new mile markers along the river? I mean, that's a small project, but that's kind of a nice one to.
Right, and then that's something that we can bring forward when the design team comes on board in January. That's separate process to continue the design and see if we can get some of that included as part of this, or whether that needs to be something that's budgeted separately with the Rec and Park District.
Yeah, I wonder if it could be part of the wayfinding sign. That would be nice.
Yep.
And the sanitation plant redesign, could that be considered a brownfield site? Is there opportunities for grants and other funding?
There are potentially opportunities there. We're actually in the process of submitting a grant application, but that grant application is in cooperation with some of the other entities, the county and City of Florence, but that's primarily for the initial assessment work, not necessarily actually cleanup work. But that's something else that we could look into in the early phases, what's out there in terms of grant monies for actual cleanup.
Okay. And what is the time frame for the cleanup within the river itself. I know it was supposed to get started in 2017, but we didn't get the permitting in time. When will we start getting the permits for 2018?
So I'm not sort of the internal PM on that, but just generally from my understanding is that basically late 2018 into 19 is when the first phase is now envisioned to start construction. And that would generally be kind of around First Street to 4th Street.
And on the downtown core, it says for the next 12 months with the new picnic pavilion and riverfront amphitheater, lawn and restrooms. Does that mean that we would move on forward with the phases to have more grass at this? Because there's a part where we can take out the road, where we're taking out the road that goes to straight to the duck pond to put in grass as well. Or is this just,
Again, that probably is a better question for Rex.
okay.
But I will say the one item listed in here, the Riverfront Amphitheater, that is actually one of the components that's part of the budget and envisioned to be implemented as part of the in-river improvements project.
Okay, because we haven't really talked a lot about a riverfront amphitheater. I guess I'd like more
It-
discussion on that.
It's designed at a very conceptual level right now, and yeah.
And what about, as far as priorities, is focusing on the First Street Gateway and Third Street connection to downtown?
Those have not been identified as obviously something within the next 12 months. I think continuing to have conversations with CDOT on that First Street intersection and the more adopted, recognized plans that we have that support the importance of that First Street intersection for the community is definitely helpful in having those discussions with CDOT. The access management plan as a next step to the US 50 corridor plan was just kicked off, from what I understand. And I'm not sure what the extents of that are, if they come all the way over to First Street, but I can ask Adam about that. And if so, that would be another opportunity to talk to CDOT about it in the shorter term.
Adam, do you have anything on that?
So the access control plan we just kicked off is for East Canyon. We're currently scoping the final design package for the downtown segment, which includes the pedestrian crossing stuff. That will also include the access control plan for the downtown core as well.
So where are we at on studying for the pedestrian crossings? Because that kind of coordinates with the connection to downtown.
Yeah, so where we're at with that is 2018 will be the final scope and design of that, and then we're looking at construction for 2019.
And are they taking into consideration our Third Street connection to downtown, and maybe that could be
That hasn't
included in
previously been in
concept?
the scope of what we want to do, but we're scoping it now, so if we want to try to include that, we can discuss that with
So
them.
that can happen,
Yeah.
looking to the future?
The last involvement I had with that, it wasn't quite sure if it was well received or not, as far as how that looks.
Well,
so-
maybe not just well received, but maybe what level it would be well received.
Correct.
I mean, at
Right.
some level, I think it's.
It'll help once this plan is adopted, then we can start flushing through some of that and deciding what the final design will be.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm digressing, but at least with Adam and Tony, at some point, I would like a clarification in terms of what scope means with the pedestrian crossing project.
So, the reason.
We don't have to do it today, but.
Yeah,
my-
well,
my
I can give it real quick, because it ties into this. So we have 4 different pots of money that we're trying to combine into a larger pedestrian sidewalk improvement project, one of which is the pedestrian crossing segment downtown. But we're looking at, and CDOT's looking at improving everything in the downtown core and possibly making some improvements on South 9th as well. So taking a $2 million job, making a $3 million job, rolling it all together, having one contractor, one construction phase for all of that. So when I talk about scoping, that's what we're trying to do is nail down that final scope, get it costed out, and then get the IGA finalized with CDOT.
Okay, but my concern comes with those meetings that we're going to have with those businesses along the highway.
Right, that comes during the access control plan phase
Okay.
of that project. Yep. And those, what we're looking at, we're hoping that can get started soon after this other access control plan process has started. It's actually about a 9 to 12 month process. So we're hoping to do the bulk of that public outreach next summer.
So if we approve this plan, then does the Third Street concept, how do we get that incorporated into this plan? I'm confused. Like we got two separate things going on here that, or not two, but at least one, and then we got CDOT, which we know listens to us really well. Where do we stand with the Third Street plan? Kind of back to where Ms. Smith's question was, into that.
So
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, so the Third Street connection was identified as part of the Centennial Master Plan process, and that was recognized as part of that process, which was the precursor to the larger Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan process. But I would say that, again, I think that connection, the concept of that connection needs to be vetted further with this next effort.
Right, so there were 3 or 4 levels of, or 3 or 4 ideas on what to do with Third Street. Like I said, I can talk to CDOT and our consultant about putting that access into the access control plan and flush through some of that if you'd like.
I would like.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Is
if
there-
we're
if-
looking
if-
towards the future, let's look towards the future and make everything coordinate together and maximize what little money we have.
Right.
Is there a team of people, you say out there now, doing access stuff?
They
For
better
one-
not be.
No, so we have 2 consultants.
What are the
Um,
consultants doing? Yeah.
So we have 2 consultants. One contract is for East Canyon, so that's 15th to the Abbey. That
Okay.
consultant is Stolfus, and we have a contract with CDOT and that contractor, and they're working on that plan. That's for the elimination of Fremont Drive.
Okay.
That's the main intent of that project, in accordance with the corridor plan, the highway corridor plan. And then we have Wilson and Company that started out doing the crossing. The reason that project got bigger is because they are also CDOT's consultant for doing all the ADA improvements through town. And then we have some additional grant dollars towards building sidewalk linkages. So we're using Wilson to do the downtown core, since they're already contracted to do that, the bulk of that work.
Where does the 4th Street Viaduct fit in, or does it at all?
The 4th Street Viaduct, as far as the resurfacing,
Whatever's going on there, is it just going to be resurfacing, or is it?
we're resurfacing
Just-
the viaduct. We already have awarded a contract,
Oh.
and they'll do that in this next year.
No sidewalk improvements or anything?
The sidewalk that's on the bridge remains. It'll be
Okay.
repaired. Yep.
Okay, okay.
We're not going to change any accesses until we've communicated with those businesses.
Right, so what happens with, real quick, not trying to take away from Dina's presentation, but an access control plan is a formal plan that city council adopts and then signs an IGA with CDOT that says, these are how we want the accesses to look, these are the triggers for when these accesses will be changed, and then we actually sign a formal agreement with CDOT that says, this is how we're gonna control access in this corridor. And all that's done after you meet with the individual owners, you have a series of public hearings and open houses, and then there's a formal adoption.
Thank you.
You think it'll eliminate any red lights?
gonna eliminate
Just the yellow
Steinmeier.
ones would be okay.
It's going to take out
I don't
Steinmeier.
care what color they are, but
That's part of the plan for East Canyon. East Canyon, the intent, one of the elements of eliminating Fremont Drive is to get rid of some signal phases.
yeah. Thank you, Adam.
Excuse me, Mayor. Have used, who has started and what kind of start have you done with regards to the sanitation plant redesign?
Nothing. Again, that's one of the first phases recommended for the first 12 months of implementation,
Okay.
is to start studying that.
And is that technically the rec district's jurisdiction, or is that cities?
It's,
It's
well, I
Rex?
think the city actually owns the land, but it's,
Sanitation district
I mean,
owns
it-
the land.
Sanitation
Sanitation
district.
owns the land.
It's in the city limits. It's
But-
owned, Griffin Park is owned by the
Rec
rec district. So it's in city limits, owned by the rec district with a piece of land, an island that's owned by the sand district.
Right.
So it'll
So
be
there
a
would be a lot of
collaborative
partners.
project
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have any
Within the
indica-
county.
within the county.
Is there any indication that the sanitation district is on board with giving up that land?
It's been talked about for years. They just use it for storage.
Yeah, I know.
They wanna do something with it. But I don't know.
Well, the reason I asked is because nothing has happened, you know, because well, you all know I'm on the sanitation district, and nothing has happened on that end with regards to the conversation even coming up at our location. So if you guys are looking at that, you need to start talking to them, okay?
Okay, any other questions? Comments? Lot to consume,
Really?
so. All right. All right, shall we move on to the next item of the trash ordinance? There's got to be some humor in the tune there. I'm not sure what it is. but-
So just, well, I guess just in closing.
Yes.
So the next step is at the December 4th meeting, this would come to council for adoption by resolution as an amendment to the comp plan.
Mayor,
Mr. Meisner?
do we have any citizens that we're going to chat or make a comment on that plan?
On
And then
which
my
plan?
concern is, and I communicated this with Dina, I appreciate the effort that went into notating the private ownership. I'm just not sure that that satisfies the request that we had from the residents, but unfortunately, we don't have anybody here. When I look at those maps, it's just not, doesn't jump out at me what's private ownership. I'll say that and let it go. No. I guess my point is we had wanted a designation of what was privately owned land, and we wound up with a map that is not privately owned land, or something like that.
Anything in here is not owned. There's a display street. If not otherwise,
The staff can work on that to make it clearer.
privately owned.
We understand your point.
Not colored by a layman color.
It's
I
pretty
mean, the
cool.
request,
It's
what?
marked. It's, when I look at this, it says anything white is private. So,
Well, that's not quite the way it is.
We can improve upon
More
it.
of a cream.
The request that we'd left with was is that we would have some type of overlay, and I realize overlay may not be practical, but to move forward from where we were at, primarily with all the residents in that area that was concerned, is that we made the concession that we would have a map that clearly identified personal property ownership, and we've created a map that,
Privately owned.
that's an interpretation.
Yeah, I mean,
I just don't
basically
think it
every,
clearly identifies personal, you've identified a lot of other things with strong colors, but the real question was private property. Those residents didn't care what the city owned and what was parks and what was government. They wanted to know on the maps what was private, and we've kind of done the opposite, is my point.
and that was, I think, by virtue of the way the existing information is within our GIS system, and as Tony mentioned, we can work with the consultants to try to modify that, but basically everything in cream, except for the oops on the lands to the very west, is private ownership, but we'll work on that.
I just have one more little thing on page 53. And I don't know if this is a grammatical thing or, but it says to integrate the defunct sanitation plan into Griffin Park. Is that just a plan that we're going to come up into the Griffin Park, or is it supposed to say integrate defunct sanitation planned?
On page 53,
Yeah.
yeah, it should say plant. Thanks for pointing that out.
Dina, thank you for all your work on this.
Thank you.
By the way.
Okay, shall we move on, or any further questions?
Trash.
I beg your pardon?
Trash. We're ready to talk trash.
And with that,
With that, would you take us away into the trash realm?
we will talk about trash. So again, just put a few slides together to walk through this, hopefully a little more succinctly. A little bit of history, which I've learned about as well. I've only been involved with this over the past few months, but literally from in talking with our city planner, she indicated to me that there were serious previous attempts on updating a trash ordinance in 4 separate previous occasions going back to 1999. And then again, as sort of a repetition from our discussion last week on the aesthetics/junkyard shipping container discussion, the most recent effort was really spurred from the 2016 citizen survey. And so that's where this most recent effort started from. And with that, staff identified a few things to focus on, and one of those was basically updating the trash ordinance. And so that work really began sort of in October of 2016 with Terry Bernath starting to work on this. So moving forward, year to date, so far we've had 2 committee meetings on this, one in January and one in April. And then I think it's also important to note, and this was before my time, that some of staff and Councilwoman Schumacher actually went out and met with one of the city's trash providers and talked through some of the concerns and issues that, from the city's perspective, from the results of the citizen survey, and then also hearing from that trash hauler's perspective and some of their concerns and needs. And then also I think it's important to note from code enforcement standpoint, they've received 32 specific complaints year to date on trash and dumpster containers within the city. And so really the focus of the amendments from the current trash ordinance to the proposed trash ordinance, which is a full reenactment and just a creation of a new ordinance to really clarify this, is number 1 is clarifying and adding definitions. Number 2 is clarifying the use of different trash containers in different contexts, i.e. residential versus commercial, and then clarifying the placement of dumpsters. And then I think it's important to note that in one of the previous discussions on this, one of the items that staff was really proposing was having appropriate screening of commercial dumpsters, and the direction, from what I understand from council, was to remove that request for screening. So that's been taken off the table for this round of the updates, although I think it's still needed. So what is what? Just a quick graphic on sort of the 3 different types of dumpsters and containers that we're talking about in the ordinance.
I hate to stop you, but repeat your last statement again about
The screening, I think it really is important to have something in the future at some point in terms of screening of commercial dumpsters. There are many communities that have ordinances that require the screening of commercial dumpsters, basically having a commercial enclosure.
But you're saying you took that out?
I was curious because I don't remember saying, do you remember if we said to remove that? Or was it just more
Yes.
to have a recommendation that they consider?
No,
And
it was asked,
officially
I
to-
remember that, I've been working on this, and it was asked to be removed because at the time, we could not, when we all went out and we were looking at all this, Dave Howard was with us, and he showed us good screening and poor screening. The poor screening looked okay, but was so difficult for them to comply with the emptying of the receptacle that it wouldn't withstand very much usage. Rolling it in, they have to go in and lift it and pull it and then dump it and release it, and we could not get in a timely fashion to get this done, the screening procedures, and it was something that Terry and Dina, I can't remember if you were just starting with this or not, but it was something that was going to have to be studied and engineered, and Dave Howard was going to work on it, so we were asked to
Okay.
drop it.
Thank
For the
you
time
for the
being,
clarification.
we can always add it. Sorry.
Thanks for that background. So just quickly, the three primary different types of containers. First is the 96-gallon container, which is typically a residential container that we see all over town. Is also often the recycling containers are those 96-gallon containers. A business dumpster, as defined in the proposed ordinance, is what you see here. It's basically greater than 96 gallons, but less than or equal to the 3 cubic yards. And that's also considered what's defined as a commercial container in the ordinance. And then the third component is a construction dumpster, and those are basically over 3 cubic yards. And those are also considered a commercial container. So if you read the language of the ordinance, a commercial container, there's actually two types of commercial container in essence.
And that, the middle one there is a picture of an improperly placed
Yes.
dumpster
It's-
according to this ordinance.
Correct, and part of the reason I believe we're here.
So is the first one.
Well, within 24 hours of having it
Can't be in the,
emptied.
can't be in the street, though.
Well, you can have it on the sidewalk or the street, so you get within 24 hours. That's what it is now. I think
Right.
it's just
Now.
24 hours now,
So
isn't it?
I'm not sure what the current language is, but in terms of the typical residential dumpsters, the proposed
Yeah.
language is, yes, that they should not be placed out on the street more than 24 hours before, and can't be kept out more than 24 hours after.
Right. It has to sit on the sidewalk or the street, otherwise they don't pick it up. It can be in your driveway, but most driveways also have a portion of the driveway that's used in the sidewalk, so.
So I think the biggest change here is, well, two biggest changes. One, from a residential standpoint, is just trying to get a handle on these business dumpsters and their use in residential areas. And then secondly, from a commercial standpoint, where there are dumpsters, knowing that we're not going to be screening them with enclosures, but at least having their placement perhaps not be front and center at the front of the property.
Commercial dumpsters, though, are for a set period of time, correct?
This is where we need
For
Terry.
like cleaning out an apartment house or cleaning out a newly bought home or something, that they're like a 30-day permitted thing.
Which one?
The commercial, the dark blue one on the right.
Has a time limit.
Well, either one of them should.
Yeah,
Sometimes you don't need the big one, but either one should require permit so that when our code enforcement
yes.
officers driving around, they should be able to walk up or have a list of these that are allowed, or there should be a permit on there so they can visually see, okay, well, this one's permitted.
But the-
Right, and we actually modified the language specifically for the construction dumpsters. So in 8.16070C, instead of giving a timeline for a construction dumpster, because construction can be 30 days or it could be 120 days. So we were simply trying to get some language in here to say, remove that dumpster within 15 days after construction is complete, because it's impossible to give a timeline.
Just going back to what Scott just said, I don't recall seeing anything here that referenced permits for dumpsters. Is there?
That's
something?
because it's an 812.
Construction.
No, that thing that we did on, you see where it references 81212? If you go back to 8.
Yeah,
remember the-
12, the only permits will apply if it's in the street.
Right.
Yeah, so
Right.
if it's on private property, as long as construction's active, it can be there.
But again, that's something that our
That's
code
right.
enforcement person will monitor.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone can't keep that out in front of their yard indefinitely.
Right.
For 20 years?
Well, I can think of several that are on Fifth. This is going to take care of the Fifth Street I mean,
As
when I
long
go-
as as long as a building permit's active,
Right,
they
correct.
could have it there in theory. as long as
Now-
it's not full. They have to empty it when it's full.
Right.
Now, what is, it's not necessarily in this ordinance, generally, I've seen some houses that have gone under remodel, and the owner gets halfway through and they stop, and these things sit in the front yard for 6 months to a year. You don't have to pull a permit for that. What is our answer for that? Do we have any right now?
Probably rare enough that's not an issue, but.
Well, again,
Well,
that's great, because when I drive on Fifth Street, there's 20 of these things on Fifth
Yeah.
Street, and most of them are hopefully going to be taken care of with this ordinance.
Yes.
Because people are using these as their primary, okay, so yeah.
Right.
It's going to be one of those
And
things
they're
we
in
don't
the
have to deal with.
streets, not just in front yards. I would say we could reference the use of construction dumpsters and removing within 15 days of construction complete. And at that point deeming construction complete as it's been abandoned or stopped.
Question. With the residential, I just want to make sure, 96 gallon, is that a requirement? I mean, I don't have I have a 50 and a 40, separate ones, but do I
No,
have to
it's-
get something like that?
No, it's up
Okay.
to.
Okay, 'cause
Up
I don't want
to.
somebody to come by and say, you guys do this, but look at this councilman, he doesn't have one there.
Right, no,
Okay.
up to.
All right.
96 is about the average.
And then with the recycling, they're using the smaller ones.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Dina, what
Yeah.
are you asking us to do? You wrote this, we got this front portion here.
Right, so the front
Right.
portion, the ordinance as written is basically a repeal and reenactment of, or reenacting of that section of the code.
That was never enacted, though, was it?
So it's a proposed ordinance.
Yeah.
So instead of just doing piecemeal updates, in this case, we're basically saying repeal the existing,
So this is the current active ordinance,
right.
really?
No.
Right, the sheet
Oh,
that I
the
had in your
yes.
packets, that's the 2 columns, the 8.16, the garbage disposal is the title of it, is the current code.
So that goes away.
We're saying this gets repealed,
Okay,
and the ordinance is what is enacted.
okay.
And we need to schedule it to get it to council so we can get this taken care of.
I have a question before we do that. On item D of page 5, where you talk about construction dumpsters, I mean, am I missing something, or that references 1212, which means that it would be placed in the public roadway or right-of-way? But,
Well, it's, again, as Adam mentioned, if they're in the public right-of-way, that references the other portion of the code and requiring a permit because it's in the
Permitted
public
use.
right-of-way.
shouldn't D say that? That for placement in the public right-of-way, you've got to refer to 1212 plus these items?
We can clarify that.
Because D doesn't tell you what they're talking about. Even though it references 1212, it really doesn't talk about where you're placing it, or unless I'm missing something. Somebody could correct me.
Just read it.
Oh, and I had
So-
another question on that, and I guess that makes sense, is construction dumpsters must be placed in residential zones abutting the property using the dumpster. What does that mean?
What we're
That's
trying
be-
to avoid there is having somebody come and place their construction dumpster, say, in front of the
In front of
the
your house.
neighbor's
I got-
house or your house instead of the house that they're working on and renovating.
We're blocking the
I got
driveway.
confused with that too, because you're not thinking that it's saying it's in the roadway.
Well, I think you're right, Jim. I think we need to say placement of the construction dumpster within the right-of-way shall be governed.
If you do that in
Because-
D, where you're understanding it's in the
Right.
roadway, then all those other things make sense.
Yeah,
I
because
spent a-
E applies to, E says may be placed on private property, and then it gives a standard for that.
Yeah.
So no, I agree with you. I think we need to say, we need to specify that's within the right-of-way.
So
We could s-
if you put it in public right away, you need a permit,
Yes.
right? So need the approval, so why would we even have to say this abutting thing that, because you wouldn't approve it that way, would you? Unless it's my property.
Well, we're also, I mean, based on the language in here, well, that's for the residential.
But aren't we
Component.
talking about, 1212 talks about placing a dumpster on a public property.
So Mayor, I think the intent there is to make sure it's in writing so that regarding the public right away. If someone was to come in and pull the permit and do that, they couldn't argue, oh, well, it's more convenient for me to have it here.
Right, we wouldn't approve that permit. We have the right to say no.
Right.
And
That's why we
some of
want it in
the-
writing, yeah.
Right, and some of them must be placed that's in here is so it's near the property, it's not in the
Okay,
center of the
okay.
street, it's adjacent to the curb.
Okay.
It's not blocking, say, a vision triangle too close to an intersection. That's what all of these, the number ones.
And
There's
would it-
one up
Get at?
off Fifth that sits on the sidewalk back over in the
Well, I
neighbor's
know.
yard.
I know. But I guess it doesn't hurt to leave it in there. The other section, you're talking about the vision triangle. I'd like to make it a little better, not one stop, you get the regulation. Is it would it be reasonable to say, give a little blurb what a vision triangle is? Because it says to go to a certain, now I've got
Yeah,
to go
and
to another.
and we do that because, you don't want the danger of specifying it here, and then we change it in 17 later for some reason, and we forgot to change it here, and then we end up with 10 different vision triangle definitions. That's why we do it this way.
And is it a problem since we're in public right of way, you would check the vision thing, wouldn't you?
Well, there's a vision triangle on private property as well.
Okay, you're right, you're right. Okay, okay.
So, I'm understanding that based upon 816, I could not, in any form or fashion, have a business dumpster on my private property.
Which subsection?
8.16, page 4.
Point what?
Well, item A, it just says that you cannot have a business
In the re-
dumpster on
in
a
a
So,
private.
residential
060.
zone. Yeah.
Under business dumpsters, under the discussion of business dumpsters?
Right, yes,
In a residential zone?
yes. I would have to have, I guess, a construction dumpster or a 96-gallon.
Unless you have livestock, horses, and then it has to be on your property, not on the city right-of-way.
Okay?
Because there are still some properties within the city that are allowed to have
But
farm
my
animals.
point is, I either have to have a 96-gallon or a 30-yard, or the smallest, maybe 15-yard dumpster. I could not have a 3-cubic dumpster
While you're doing repairs?
Only for
Right.
construction. No, you could use a 3-yard.
Construction.
During
Not according to
He's talking
this.
about household
Yes,
trash
you can.
collection.
No, I'm not at this point.
Sorry.
Well,
So Jim?
yeah, this is meant to
If
be
you pull a permit,
regular.
you can.
No, not according to this.
It's in residential zone.
No, he's talking about there's a hole. If he wants to do construction and not rent the big dumpster, he wants to rent a smaller one.
Right.
And I can't do it. Because I have to have, on a residential lot, I have to have a 96, but I could have a construction dumpster within the guidelines of a construction dumpster, even though I only need a
Right.
3-cubic foot.
So they'll need to fix that.
So somehow, and the part of that problem is how we classified business and construction, I think.
Right, and I think the intent there in terms of the definitions was simply from a size standpoint, but yes, we can add language in clarifying you can use a
Yeah.
business dumpster, the size of that dumpster for construction as well.
Yeah, we can just add an E under construction dumpsters, or we'll just add F and say, if they want to use a smaller than 3-cubic yard dumpster, they can do that. That'd be an easy fix. We just add an exception under construction dumpsters.
Or clarify the definition.
You could use 1096
I swear I seen it in.
gallon.
Or how about if you just said construction or business, I mean, in, what is that, in 16.070 E, you could just say, business or construction dumpsters may be placed on private property. Subject to this, if it's not in the.
No, I think you got to specify it's being used for construction specifically.
All right,
Yep.
Yeah,
okay.
we can do that.
No household trash, yeah.
Kathy, did you say that this was run by the local trash hauler people?
We worked with,
I mean, work with, did they get a
Yeah.
copy of this?
No,
do they have a copy of this, Adam or Dina?
I'm fairly certain they have versions of it, but
Yeah,
I
not this
can't
latest
speak to this
version.
final copy.
they have not seen this copy.
Okay.
So we better make sure they see it before it goes to council.
They're kind of the experts. The only other thing is that, so it's not legal to to do dumpster diving in Canyon City.
It's not?
Not
Not
according
according to
to
this.
D. Under, right.
You can- I'm
There
sorry.
goes my evening plans.
I marked this off here. It says it is shall be unlawful for any person other than a renter, authorized owner or user of trash hauler to remove any contents of a trash receptacle or commercial container. So I guess if the owner or the tenant changes their mind, they can go pull that back out of the trash receptacle. So,
That's the doll
Well, it
clause.
is.
I think we're talking
Reclaiming,
about
they're
a
reclaiming their
trespass.
own trash.
I'm sorry, it's late and.
So is there anything that prevents people from taking their trash and dumping it in the Safeway dumpster?
Well, that's a
Safeway's
trespass.
cameras.
That's a
Is that-
trespass.
You go on a trespassing issue to do that?
Trespass.
I think there's ordinances already for that.
Are we
There is.
repealing that ordinance?
That's a
Or are you
trespass.
just talking about a strict, I'm dead serious. I mean, if you sit at 15th Street
I'm
and
talking
watch
about,
people,
but I'm
they'll
talking about a
drive up the-
private property trespass. I mean, our
Yeah.
attorney can
Right.
clue in on that, but
We've
I
had it
think
at the
without-
building I've been at, and they had cameras on it, and I saw the gal doing it, so I went out and dug out the trash and got her electric bill, and they gave her a summons.
I
She had to
think
go to court.
Jim's question and
So-
point is if we're repealing something, we're not missing anything at this point, right? We don't want someone coming back and,
Right,
Well,
we
it's
don't- We
two-sided.
don't think so. And usually those private dumpsters and private property owners or the haulers have signs on those dumpsters saying no illegal dumping.
Or the locked. A lot
Yeah,
of them
ours,
have
we had to
locks
lock
now.
ours because
Yes.
That would be another
The
reason to
next
have
day it's full.
enclosures.
I guess I was confused as to why we're prohibiting people to dump it in a government-owned dumpster, but not in a private dumpster. So what's the logic there?
Can you refer to a specific section?
I'm talking to item B on page 7 under 816, that specifically states you cannot put your trash in a dumpster that's on city or public property. And if we're doing that for public property, why don't we have the same terminology for a dumpster that doesn't belong to you?
You simply just saying add private.
Yeah, that would
I
satisfy
mean,
me.
you have to say the city part, right? Because otherwise people will use city dumpsters
Yeah.
and trash cans to dispose of trash.
Which they do in the
If you don't have it
parks
Friday,
anyway.
People will do it, right? We don't have any way to enforce it.
So this stopped them, right?
Well, there's no way to enforce it. if it's not
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Go to Veterans Park the day before trash day and look at those 50-gallon drums with the baggies in them. They are,
So, do we need to add private? Is that what you're saying?
That's the pleasure of council. I'm just pointing
Yep.
that it
So I
confuses
just
me
made a
as to.
note to make sure we add some language about don't dump on private
Pardon?
property.
Do I?
I just made a note
Oh.
to add language.
And
I mean,
maybe
Do not
check with
dump
the
on private
attorneys
property.
too. I think I would check with the attorneys as well to make sure that's okay.
maybe it's free speech. You didn't know.
Easy.
That's why
Yeah.
CDOT took off all the trash cans on the.
And just a clarification, I could have sworn in my multiple readings of this that there was something about screening from the highways and residential properties, but Ashley tells me it's not in there. And I keep scanning it. There's nothing in there
took it out.
in any section?
From my understanding at previous session, it was asked to be
It was
taken
in it
out.
before. It was taken out last time they brought it to us.
Yeah, I know, I must have been drinking or something. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Looks fine. I think. I didn't, we're prohibiting dumpster diving.
yeah, on page 5, E at the top of the page, it says every effort shall be made to locate the business dumpster
No.
so they're not visible. But it just says every effort shall be made.
Where's that at? I'm sorry.
It's letter E on page 5.
Okay. Phew. Thank you.
So I don't, someone could get in an argument, I guess, on whether they've made all the efforts.
Okay, I knew it was in there somewhere.
And I know we had a conversation about making a helpful, maybe financial
Yes, it is.
commitment. If they wish to do screening, we could help them out.
I agree.
Put some money aside and then have a design that would work for the haulers and
That
stuff and.
Everybody, it
And-
wouldn't be too expensive. Some of the ones, there is a really, really good one down off Fremont Drive. and the company spent a lot of money, and it's done very well. But there's a few others that have crumbled the first time the dumpster was let down, because it'll roll if the pavement's not perfectly straight, and it'll destroy the gate or it'll destroy the back of it.
There needs to be a
So it was-
concrete
We
curb.
took it out, yeah.
Well, as a grant, if we could do that, we would have some skin in the game and we would have approval,
Yes.
right? So that we
And
could say this is
it
what.
was, I think Terry took it back to Howard's, didn't they? And they were gonna work on it and get back with Terry, who was gonna get back with us. But I don't know if they've ever,
Well, there's plenty of design
Yeah.
details and options that we could bring forward in terms of how to do an appropriate enclosure.
And having bumps in there so that
That,
it's not rolling.
that might be a discussion for another time.
But I would think, I mean, I think
Yes.
this would
Okay.
be a huge start, just to have this adopted and in place in terms of some of the visual
It would be-
impact.
yeah, it would be nice to get it on the books so that we can, I don't know if you guys drive in neighborhoods, but going home and coming to work, I pass 7 of
Okay.
them. And it would be nice to clean up our town.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, are we done with that? Can we move on to, do we want to go to the electric personal assistive mobile devices? Is that on our agenda?
Yes.
It is.
Number 3.
You have
Number
a
3.
memo last Monday, November the 6th. You had a nice discussion on proposed ordinance 2517, which would prohibit motorized self-propelled vehicles such as Segways and engaged e-bikes, not disengaged, but engaged e-bikes from cities' parks, trails, and sidewalks, with the exception to accommodate ADA issues. Council couldn't reach consensus, so talking to the council, I think we've come up with a couple of proposed amendments, but hopefully we'll achieve consensus. First, Segways for non-ADA purposes would be permitted to cross the pedestrian bridge at Third Street to access the south side of the river, and particularly they want to access the mansion over there, as long as they were dismounted and pushed across the bridge. Because that bridge, like many parts of the trail, have easement restrictions for complete prohibition of motorized vehicles. So we cannot risk violating those easement agreements. We have agreements with, for example, at that location with the train, further down the pedestrian bridge west of First, we have an easement agreement with Black Hills for the same reasons. Rec District has easement agreements, you know, east of Ninth with the same language, so we have to be very, very careful not to violate those agreements. So that would at least allow them physically to get to the other side of the river as an option to going through, for example, First Street intersection, which, you know, may be a little problematic on the Segway. It's a busy intersection with heavy traffic at high speeds. I don't think I'd want to do it, or even waiting at the light on Third. So that would give them an alternative. It's not their only option, but it's an option. And then e-bikes would be permitted on the Riverwalk Trail in our section of trail, subject to the engines being disengaged, so the non-motorized. So that would comply with our easement agreements. And then periodically, we'll have the police patrol the trail to make sure that people are being honest about that. And if not, the current fine is in the books at $50 for the first offense, $100 for any subsequent offenses.
Can you walk a Segway?
Push one, yeah,
I don't
apparently
know.
the gizmo bends down, you like push it like a wheelbarrow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Have we tested that theory?
I haven't personally,
With your bad hand, you need to do that.
I don't think so.
I'm
I
just,
think with two
I'm
hands you
still
can.
adamant.
As an ADA.
Huh?
Tony qualifies as an ADA, he could ride
He
his
qualifies
Yes,
Segway.
for
I can
more.
do, yeah, I can ride across, I don't have to push.
He qualifies for more than ADA.
No, I think you're right. I think you
Yeah.
can lay them down and
Yeah, you can
walk
lay them down,
across
push them. I've
think
I've
you
talked
can
to
lay 'em-
people.
You have to be able to load them up onto the trailer somehow.
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
but
They're
but you do
mobile.
that motorized.
Oh, yeah.
No, no.
What?
You-
Not,
Lift them.
What?
not the tourists, yeah.
No,
So if
no.
you think about these businesses, they have 6 of these things,
Yeah.
right? And they have to get them on trailers to take them back.
Yeah.
Tourists aren't gonna be standing
Driving
on
them
top
up.
of them and driving up, nor,
Yeah.
yeah.
They can be pushed up.
Yeah.
Again, it's not the most convenient, we're not gonna
I
argue
think
that it is.
They've gotta be power assisted to get up on trailers. So
Could.
You can disengage the clutch, and then it's like you said, it's just like a motor.
Yeah,
You're
you
talking
can
about a
push
couple
it.
100-pound machine that you're gonna push over
Yeah,
the bridge.
So I mean, it's gotta be a.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
got the benefit of 2 wheels to assist you.
A car's
Beyond
got
the
a
Stone
benefit of
Age.
4 wheels.
It's beyond the Stone Age. So that's an option, and again, it's not their only opportunity to get to the south side of the river. They can still use traditional streets to do that, so we're just wanting to provide some flexibility there. And then the second matter was allowing e-bikes, as long as they were disengaged, we would permit them. And if there's problems, either by our patrols, more likely by complaint, we'll deal with it. But we hope that that will be minimal.
Can we propose that verbiage to the e-bike, or to the Segway people? Or is that outside of our realm of customer service?
What, you want them to approve this?
Well,
Well, it's a
I mean, if the guy
practicality.
can't push,
Yeah.
we all making the assumption that you can
Yeah.
push a Segway over the bridge, and I question that.
Well, then we're gonna get back to the point, they're gonna say, well, we can't do it, so we need to have them be able to drive them over. So it's gonna be one of those issues that it's not 100% being able to satisfy each and every element. Because if I'm against that, I'm gonna come up to you and say, oh, that's too heavy for me to push, so I want to be able to drive it over.
And you can't drive it.
Because they cannot be used in a motorized fashion
I
across
understand
that
that.
bridge, period. So if they can't do it, then they have other options. This is just an option, should they be able to do it? And I think that's just a question of someone pushing the instrument across the bridge. If it's too heavy for someone, then they have to use an alternative route. But we can't completely accommodate them. But it is an option.
Mayor.
I think that I've ridden them, and I think I could push it. But again, I think maybe that's a business decision, that if they have a customer that is unable, I probably would figure that out.
I
I think it's a good compromise.
I received an email today from Segway Corp, and the models that disengage so you can push them also have a power assist. So you can dismount and use the power assist. They actually have those because they push them upstairs. So if they're using a model that can be, where the drive can be disengaged, it likely has a power assist as well.
How would you have a power assist without using a motor?
Well, you could, that's what I'm saying.
You can't.
But they're dismounted, so we could just say as long as they're dismounted, Segways can be, I mean, the only thing I don't like about this ordinance as proposed is it's specific to a certain location. Who cares if they push their Segway up and down the Riverwalk?
Good point.
Well, that's what I'm
So-
saying, once
It's
they
gonna be
get
a
off
walking
the,
speed anyway.
Right,
they get off the bridge, they still is the segment of sidewalk or. river
right,
trail
right.
that
On
they
both
have to
sides of the
go on
bridge
to
is
get to the
sidewalk
parking
or,
lot.
or Park
Yeah.
Road, which is prohibited, so.
Okay, yeah,
So I would say we just change the language to say
yeah.
that they can be there as long as they're dismounted.
I agree. Let's do that and move on. Is that okay with everybody? I think this is fine.
I think it's the best.
I think it's a good, well, I think we've compromised very well to accommodate that, so. Okay. Council and staff informational update. Does any council or staff have any informational update? It's,
No,
right here it says informational, so
We may
I've
need
got
to-
to do this.
We may need to do an executive session.
Tonight?
No.
Well, when's our next meeting?
Monday.
Monday and the 4th. We got 2 items for executive session. They shouldn't last very long on Monday.
We've always said that, we're here till 9.
Well,
What are the 2 items for Monday night?
one relates to the Royal Gorge Bridge, the other relates to a tax collection issue.
Do we need to add another item to
Oh,
that
there's a third
executive
item.
session?
Is there a
For the-
third item?
Yeah, that's your prerogative.
No, yeah, Jim has it.
What's the third item?
I'm working on it.
Just work with Kathy, and she'll get the correct verbiage on the agenda and materials to the council.
Okay.
So I-
No problem.
Yes, Dina?
I have one other announcement. So yesterday, the Community Development Department Code Enforcement Division launched a fall cleanup program. The information should be on the city's website, and it should have been in the shopper yesterday and should be coming out soon in the Daily Record. Basically, a twofold program. One is a Retire the Tire program where folks can come in and get a voucher for up to 4 tires to appropriately dispose of those tires at the vendor that's agreed to partner with us for the program. And then the second program is Get Rid of the Beast Before the Feast, which is focused on those older, large projection TVs. And so again, folks can come into the city, obtain a voucher for any TV that's larger than 45 inches, and take that voucher to Twin Enviro.
Wow.
Great.
Great. Dina, is there any, we get a report from the police department on some of their activities. Is there a way, or is it even appropriate to get some type of listing of what citations were handed out from the code department? And
We do,
just-
and we've actually been talking about that. I have recently been receiving monthly updates in terms of number of violations and how many folks are compliant. And we've been talking about trying to get some of that information into the paper. So we will hopefully start that in 2018.
Okay, good thing. And it's only see what the trend is,
Do what?
or any trend at all. So.
Get your weeds done.
And am I on that list?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Probably.
People individually.
No, I hope your Vicodin wears off. Okay, is that it?
That's it.
We're adjourned.